Hi everyone, I'm Malik Thompson, and today I'll be talking about inclusive leadership. This presentation is based on Chapter 15 of Peter Northhouse's book, Leadership Theory and Practice. Inclusive leadership is all about how leaders can create an environment where every person feels like they belong, but also where their unique contributions are valued. Over the next few minutes, I'll cover what inclusive leadership is, why it matters, some of the limitations, recent trends, and finally, my assessment of its relevance today. First, let's talk about what inclusive leadership actually is. According to Northhouse, it's not a completely separate theory of leadership, but more of a framework that helps leaders manage diverse teams effectively. The main idea is that leaders can create an environment where people feel like they belong and are valued for their unique qualities. Northhouse connects this idea to something called optimal distinctiveness theory, which is basically the idea that people want to feel part of a group, but also want to maintain their individuality. Inclusive leadership balances those two needs. It's about creating a climate where everyone can contribute and feel recognized. Next, let's look at how this actually works in practice. Northhouse breaks it down into three main pieces. First, the antecedent conditions. This is basically the trait and values of the leader and the organizational context that either supports or hinders inclusion. Second, the behaviors themselves. So, what the leader actually does to include everyone, like encouraging participation, sharing decision making, and being fair. And finally, the outcomes, which are the positive effects of inclusion. Followers feel psychologically safe, they engage more, and team performance improves. The key takeaway is that inclusive leadership isn't just about being nice, it's about creating a structured environment that values everyone's input. Why does this matter in leadership theory? Northhouse explains that inclusive leadership expands traditional theories by focusing on diversity and inclusion. It integrates relational elements, meaning it looks at how leaders interact with followers to create trust and engagement. And importantly, it ties leadership directly to measurable outcomes like engagement, psychological safety, and team performance. In short, inclusive leadership connects leadership behaviors with practical results in diverse and global work environments. It's kind of like adding a modern, practical layer on top of classic leadership theories. Of course, no theory is perfect. Northhouse points out a few criticisms of inclusive leadership. First, it isn't fully a standalone theory. It overlaps with other leadership models, like relational or transformational leadership. Second, it's hard to measure consistently. What does it actually look like day to day, and how do we know if a leader is doing it well? Third, if inclusion isn't supported by the organization's culture, it can feel superficial or even like tokenism. And finally, implementing inclusive leadership effectively takes time and resources. So it's not something you can just flip on overnight. Even though Northhouse's chapter focuses on the foundational ideas, he highlights some trends that are really relevant today. For example, inclusive leadership is increasingly important in global teams and hybrid work environments, where people may feel isolated or even overlooked. Leaders who focus on inclusion can help ensure everyone's voice is heard, even when people aren't physically in the office. And we see that inclusive practices, like encouraging participation and reducing status differences, can improve engagement, team coordination, and overall performance. Basically, it's an idea that becoming more important as workplaces get more diverse and distributed. But finally, let's talk about why inclusive leadership matters now. In my opinion, it's extremely useful because it gives leaders a concrete way to manage diversity, improve engagement, and boost team performance. It's practical because leaders can adopt specific behaviors like fairness, encouraging participation, and recognizing contributions. That said, it does require support from the organization, such as policies, culture, and even metrics to hold leaders accountable. Overall, I'd say inclusive leadership is highly relevant and really critical for modern organizations, especially in multicultural, hybrid, or global work environments. That will bring us to the end of my presentation. All the information I've shared today comes directly from Peter Northhouse's leadership, theory, and practice. Thank you, and have a good day.